between American English and British English. What's up, Minaka English warriors? It's your girl, 40%, back at it again with another mind-blowing content. Today, we're spilling the tea on British and American English. Kung san ang cookies podang biscuits, ang pants podang trouser, at ang grammar, minsan parang hugot, medio complicado. So smash that like button, tag your classmates, and let's flex those English skills. Let's G. Our story begins about 1,500 years ago. Back then, England wasn't called England, and it definitely didn't speak English. It all started with the three Germanic tribes who brought their languages to Britain in the 5th century. What they spoke is what we now call Old English. Did you know? About 85% of Old English words are no longer used today. Fast forward to 1066, and here comes the Norman conquest. When the Normans took over England, they brought French with them. French became the language of the elite, while Old English remained the language of the common folk. Over time, the two merged, creating Middle English. By the 1500s, English was transforming again, thanks to writers like William Shakespeare. This was the era of early modern English, the language of Shakespeare and the King James Bible. In the 1600s, English settlers arrived in North America. They brought early modern English with them. In the early 1800s, Noah Webster, an American lexicographer, decided it was time to simplify American English. Why? To create a distinct American identity. Over time, differences between British and American English became more noticeable. Let's talk about three big areas where they differ: spelling, vocabulary, and grammar. First is the vocabulary. Let's start with everyday objects. Imagine you're shopping for groceries. In the US, you'd grab a shopping cart, but in the UK, you'd take a trolley. Same wheels, different names. And if you're looking for cookies, don't call them cookies in Britain, ask for biscuits. But here's the twist. What Americans call biscuits are soft, flaky bread rolls, which don't even exist in the UK. Confused yet? Transportation is another area where British and American English go their separate ways. For example, in the US, you'd fill your gas tank, but in the UK, you'd top up your petrol tank. And if you're driving a big truck, that's a lorry in Britain. Clothing is where things get hilariously different. In America, you wear pants under your clothes. In Britain, pants means underwear. So, don't be surprised if someone laughs when you say, "I like your pants." Brits call outerwear pants trousers. Got it? Food terms are a smorgasbord of differences. In America, you'd eat fries with your burger, but in Britain, you'd order chips. And those crispy snacks Americans call chips, Brits call them crisps. Then there's jumper in Britain, which means a sweater, while vest in the UK means an undershirt, not a sleeveless jacket. See how one word can flip your wardrobe upside down? Sometimes, British English sounds a bit more formal. For example, Brits say holiday for what Americans call vacation. And instead of saying apartment, they'll say flat. It's like their vocabulary wears a little bow tie. Let's start with the basics, everyday items. Imagine you're in a store in the US. You'd grab a shopping cart to load up your groceries. But hop across the pond, and in the UK, you'd use a trolley. The word may change, but the squeaky wheels remain the same. When you're craving something sweet, it gets even trickier. Americans call them cookies, but in Britain, they're biscuits. And what about dessert? In the US, you'd ask for dessert or candy. In the UK, you'd have pudding or sweets. Just don't expect actual pudding, it's just a word for dessert. Now, here's where things get funny. Americans also have something called biscuits, but they're soft, flaky bread rolls served with savory dishes like fried chicken. They're nothing like British biscuits, which are crunchy and often paired with tea. The British word biscuit comes from the French biscuit, meaning twice cooked, reflecting how traditional biscuits were baked. Next, let's hit the road, literally. In the US, you'd pull up to a gas station to fill your gas tank. In the UK, though, you'd stop at a petrol station to top up your petrol. What about the vehicles on the road? Americans drive on highways or freeways, while Brits take motorways. Oh, and don't forget, Americans park in parking lots, while Brits use car parks. The function's the same, but the phrasing adds a dash of regional flair. Fun fact: British petrol comes from the Greek petra, rock, and Latin oleum, oil, while American gas is short for gasoline. Fashion is another area where British and American English clash, and sometimes hilariously so. For instance, in America, you wear pants as part of your outfit. But in Britain, pants means underwear. What Americans call pants, Brits call trousers. Imagine the confusion if you complimented a Brit on their pants. Here's another example. What Americans call a sweater, Brits refer to as a jumper. And a vest? In the US, it's a sleeveless jacket, often worn with formal wear. But in Britain, a vest is an undershirt. One word, two completely different wardrobe staples. Fun fact. In older British English, trousers were sometimes called breeches. The modern word pants. In the US, you'd eat fries with your burger, but in Britain, you'd order chips. And those crispy snacks Americans call chips? Brits call them crisps. It's a language twist that can leave you scratching your head when you're hungry. And what about dessert? Americans use the straightforward terms dessert or candy. Brits? They might call it pudding or sweets. But here's the kicker. British pudding doesn't always mean a sweet dish. Sometimes, it's savory, like Yorkshire pudding. Confused yet? You're not alone. Fun fact, British pudding originally referred to dishes made with boiled or steamed batter, both sweet and savory. Finally, let's talk about formality. British English often sounds a bit more proper, while American English leans toward simplicity. For example, Brits say holiday instead of vacation. It sounds quaint and leisurely, doesn't it? Similarly, Brits use flat for an apartment and lift for an elevator. It's like their vocabulary comes with a side of afternoon tea. British vocabulary often preserves older terms influenced by French, while American English developed independently, favoring straightforwardness. Vocabulary differences are like secret codes that make each variant of English unique. Whether you're shopping for cookies or biscuits, filling up your gas tank or petrol tank, or heading to a flat instead of an apartment, these quirks add color to the language we share. Which terms do you prefer? Are you team trolley or team shopping cart? Share your thoughts below, and let's keep the conversation going. But wait, it doesn't stop at vocabulary. Another big area where American and British English like to show their individuality is in spelling. Before we dive into the details, let's set the stage. Why are there spelling differences between American and British English? It all boils down to history. After the American Revolution, the U.S. wanted its own identity, not just politically but linguistically. Noah Webster, the man behind the first American dictionary, decided to simplify and streamline English spelling to make it more logical. His changes reflected American ideals of efficiency and practicality, while British English remained tied to its European roots. Fun fact on screen. Noah Webster believed simplifying spelling would improve literacy and national identity. His dictionary, published in 1828, was a cultural milestone. He wanted to cut out unnecessary letters, change confusing spellings, and make English reflect American identity. And that's why we have some key differences today. One of the most noticeable differences is the missing U in American spellings. British English loves words like color, favor, and honor. But Noah Webster decided, let's save some ink. So, Americans spell these words color, favor, and honor. Fun fact, British English kept the U because it comes from French influences. Americans wanted a cleaner, phonetic look. Team color or team color, which are you? Next up, verbs ending in eyes or eyes. Americans stick with realize, organize, and analyze. Brits? They often prefer realize, organize, and analyze. But here's the twist, both forms are technically correct in British English. It's just that the eyes form is more common. Here's a trick 1. Doubling consonants. In British English, words like traveling, cancelled, and label double their consonants before adding endings. Americans? They keep it simple, traveling, cancelled, labeled. Why? Because Webster thought, why double up if one letter will do? But be careful, this rule only applies when the stress is on the first syllable. American English values efficiency and practicality, while British English holds onto historical and European influences. Both are valid, and both we've already explored vocabulary and spelling differences between American and British English, but now we're tackling something just as fascinating, grammar. Yep, Even the rules of the road for English sentences can vary across the Atlantic. From verb usage to prepositions, let's dig into the nitty-gritty of how grammar changes depending on where you are. Let's start with the present perfect tense. In British English, this tense is used much more frequently than in American English. For example, a Brit might say, I've already eaten, while an American would simply say, I already ate. Both are correct, but Americans often prefer the simpler past tense. So, next time you're deciding whether to use have or not, think about which side of the pond you're channeling. Now let's talk about prepositions, those little words that can cause big differences. Americans tend to say on the weekend, while Brits would say at the weekend. Same idea, different preposition. And here's another one. Americans say, write me soon, while Brits say, write to me soon. That little "to" adds a dash of British charm. Here's a fun one, collective nouns. In American English, collective nouns like team or family are treated as singular. You'd say, the team is winning. But in British English, collective nouns can be singular or plural. You'd hear, the team are winning or the family are going on holiday. It depends on whether they're seen as a group or as individuals. Brits love treating collective nouns as plural when the mood strikes. Now, let's talk about irregular verbs. Americans use identings for most past tense verbs, like learned and burned. Brits, on the other hand, often use T endings, like learned and burned. Fun fact, T endings were common in older English, but Americans simplified things over time. Brits, of course, decided to keep it classic. Lastly, let's talk about modal verbs. Brits often use shall for the future tense, as in I shall go tomorrow. Americans find that a bit too formal and prefer I will go tomorrow. And here's another one. Brits might say needn't instead of don't need to, as in you needn't worry. Americans almost never use needn't. It's charmingly old-fashioned. Adverb placement can also vary between British and American English. British, she's really clever, isn't she? American, she really is clever, isn't she? Notice how the adverb shifts slightly? Both are correct but reflect different styles of speech. So, there you have it, some of the most interesting grammar differences between American and British English. Whether you're saying at the weekend or on the weekend, using learned or learned, it's all part of the rich. Remember, grammar isn't about being right or wrong, it's about understanding and connection. And that wraps up our journey through the differences in vocabulary, spelling, and grammar between American and British English. I hope you enjoyed discovering the quirks and charms of these two versions of our shared language. But wait, it's your turn now. I've provided a link to a post-assessment quiz to test your knowledge on everything we've covered. Think you can tell your color from your color or your real eyes from your real eyes? Click the link, take the quiz, and see how much you've learned. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fun language lessons.